All right, so now we have an idea of what organizations are. Let's look at the second option for organizing our users, okay? The second way, as I mentioned before, are called user groups, okay? Now, user groups are groupings of users that are going to transcend the organizational structure, okay? These user groups are going to be distinct, and they can be essentially any group that you define. All right, so in the context of Livingston Hotels and Resorts, for example, if we wanted to provide a special group for all of the managers or staff or anything along those lines across all of our hotels and resorts, we can do that with user groups. Now, as I already mentioned, something that you can also keep in mind is that LDAP groups, when integrated with the platform, are going to bring your users in those LDAP groups and create a user group out of them. Okay, we saw what this looked like when we used the Content Sampler app. We brought in our users and their groups, and we had those user groups that would have been essentially in an LDAP server. So this sort of gives us what I like to call the intentional and unintentional use of user groups, okay? The unintentional, for simplicity, is going to be user groups, again, that are generated via LDAP, all right? Now, the intentional use is going to be creating user groups intentionally, regardless of LDAP or integration or anything along those lines, for a particular purpose. Something that happens when you create user groups, and this again could be an LDAP or otherwise, is you can give specific resources to the users in that group, okay? So we can create user groups in the control panel, okay, going to that user section and user groups. And once they're created, you can do a couple of things. You can add a role to those in the user groups, okay? So that makes it a little bit faster for you to do that if you wanted to make groups based on roles. All right, and you can also give them access to their own special set of pages, okay? User group pages can be used for delivering content to those in the user group, giving them their own dashboard, for example, or it can give a group of users a sort of workspace where they can collaborate on things together, depending on the widgets that you use. Okay, so an example of this might be if you wanted all of your employees to have access to certain information, you could create a user group for all of your staff or employees, and you can give them a private set of pages for that user group. And essentially what that would do is it would give them a common dashboard to work with. All right, so keep that in mind as well. That would be more of the intentional use of user groups, and the unintentional use would be just integrating with something like LDAP and having those groups generated for you. All right, so keep in mind that these user groups allow you to group those users across the organization structure, allowing us to do things like give Omar the ability to interact with the marketing group or something along those lines, even though they're technically not in the same department because they're working on a specific project. Or we could take the managers and put them all in one workspace where they can have access to certain resources on those user group pages. Okay, so it is what I would call a secondary way of grouping users, but it can be used very specifically and intentionally to make sure your users are having the best experience possible on the platform. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to create some user groups together to take a look at what this actually looks like on the platform, and then we'll go ahead and talk about strategies for both organizations and user groups.